Galia is keen to continue with the service, as may all of you be. However, first a few words of Torah. So as we discussed last week, we're really at a turning point, at a time of transition, both in the season and in the story of the Chumash, of the story of the Torah. In the transition of our season, as I mentioned, we've just entered the 3 weeks. And as every Jewish professional knows, once you've entered 3 weeks, it's almost time for the high holidays. So we're really already beginning. Jennifer's like, yeah. We're definitely already thinking about the high holidays. This shift in the season, as we discussed last week, is marked by the balance between water and fire, as the power of the sun is beginning to overtake the wonderful greenness that we've been blessed with from these recent weeks of precipitation. And in the story of the Torah, we're really coming to a change in generation. We've already had the deaths of Miriam and of Aaron, and Moses has had his death foretold, and the 38 years of wandering in the wilderness have now passed, and the people are on the edge, the very edge of the promised land. And that's where we find ourselves in Parshat Pinchas. So Parshat Pinchas is very concerned, I think, with issues of not just inheritance and the continuity that can exist across time, but actually even of things that transcend time, and even of a certain sort of immortality. So what am I talking about? Well, on a very practical level, we actually begin this story of transmission and moving forward into the future, as we mentioned before, with another of these censuses. Why do we have yet another census? As I mentioned, the rabbis call this book of the Torah the book of censuses, Chomesh HaPikudim. Well, because it's a new group of people. The old generation has died out, and now they're counting the next generation as they're beginning to enter the land. And what's more, it's literally these clans, these ancestral houses, that the land is going to be divided between. So they're really looking forward to the distribution of the land of Israel into different tribal territories. And that is why the daughters of Tzlofchad, as we heard in this morning's parsha, we got the first mention of the 5 sisters, Chogla, Machla, Milcah, Tirzah, Noah, who have no brothers, and they step up and say, we didn't get to this part yet, we heard it mentioned in the census, but they step up and say, why should our father's name die out just because he had no sons? We should have a share in the land so that our father's name can continue. So we see not only that they are trying to have a holding in the land, but also it's having a holding in the land is a way of continuing a family identity and a family name. And these are all ways that we to our day, inheritances and names that pass down through the generations, are also ways that we manage to somewhat transcend time and transcend death and have something of us continue to live beyond our immediate lifetimes. So that's one aspect, I think, that this parsha has as a way of looking into transition and transmission across the generations. But there are a couple others which I think are very interesting to consider too. Now, one, I think several of the people here will quickly get what I'm talking about. The regulars, those who come to hear the Torah read very often, will know that Pinchas is actually the parsha that we read from the most often, I believe, of all the parshiot, which is because
Rosh Chodesh or the Chagim.
Exactly. When we take out a second Sefer Torah, we have a second reading from the Torah. It's always from Parshat Pinchas. Why? Because Parshat Pinchas is the place where it's one of the places in the Torah which gives us a full calendar of all the holidays. So when we think about this, actually, this is another way in which we, in a way, transcend time. This idea of cyclical time. The time isn't just linear. That every time we reach this season, every Rosh Chodesh, and indeed, although we no longer offer the sacrifices that we read about in Parshat Pinchas, the cycle of holidays, the calendar that we read about, is still the calendar that we celebrate. Every single one of the holidays mentioned in Parshat Pinchas is still celebrated by us today. So this is another way, I think, which is quite remarkable. When you think this is several thousand years old, this document, we are still celebrating this calendar, and we're still very much, I think, identified with the people in this book. We literally consider them to be our literal ancestors. And for those of us who are Jews by choice, we consider them to be our literal spiritual ancestors. But for those of us who are born Jews, we actually literally consider them to be our great, etc., grandmothers and grandfathers. These are our people. Quite remarkable. So then the third way, or a third aspect of this transmission across the generations, across time, we see a few different things in this parasha. So firstly, we do see as Moses knows he's going to die, he is told to climb a mountain and look out across the promised land. What is the name of that mountain? It is Har HaAvarim. It is literally the mountain of transitions. He himself is given the vantage point of understanding the transition that's going on, and he's told there that he needs to appoint a successor. Not only do we have later in this parsha, we didn't read it today, but we have the Samicha, exactly. We have the appointing of Joshua, the son of Nun, as Moses' successor, but we also get the ceremony by which Moses appoints and anoints and installs, or ordains is the word that we use, ordains Joshua using his two hands, laying his hands upon him, right? And this is, as Lillian says, what we call smicha, which is laying on of hands. And where else do we find this word smicha still used today? Right, the ordination of rabbis. And we might remember that we call Moses Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our rabbi. So we say that the chain of transmission of the rabbinate has actually come down all the way from the generation of Moses through the generation of Joshua, all the way down through the many, many generations that have come and gone between them to us in this day, and even to me in my receiving of rabbinic ordination. But this is another way that this parsha hints at this transmission through generations. Another, of course, is in the priesthood. Pinchas, at the beginning of this parsha, is told that he receives a covenant of peace, and that it will be through his given and passed along through his descendants throughout all the generations. And so the priesthood, alongside the rabbinate, may be a little bit less immediate to us, but it's another way that we feel this current and continuity of divine blessing and inspiration and guidance that comes to us from thousands of years ago all the way through till today. But that's not all. Okay, so this is the part I really want to get to. There are actually in this parsha some very interesting currents of immortality. So you may have heard this before, but there's a fascinating idea that is not just in the mystical writing, but actually in the Targum, the early Aramaic translations of the Torah, that Pinchas is reincarnated as Elijah, right? And that's one of the reasons that the story, as I mentioned, the Haftarah, if we weren't already in the 3 weeks, the Haftarah would be one of the stories of Elijah. And in fact, it's the story of Elijah where he describes himself as being kaneh, having zeal. He's zealous or jealous, same word that Z and J can transpose linguistically. He's zealous or jealous for the Lord, as is Pinchas, is described in the same way. And this is one of the reasons that they see Pinchas as being later reincarnated as Elijah. And as you may remember about Elijah, according to the Bible, Elijah doesn't die. He is taken up to heaven alive, which is one of the reasons he is this figure that comes to us at liminal moments of profound transition, like at the end of the Seder, where we're entering freedom, and at every Brit Milah, Elijah is said to be there holding the ceremony. So Pinchas and Elijah are these characters that are said not to quite die in the normal way, just to step outside of time and to be able to continue to echo through time, Cosby and Zimri, by the way, the people that Pinchas killed, are also said to be reincarnations. The Zohar says that they are reincarnations of Dinah and Shechem, right? Very interesting. But there's another very interesting character who's mentioned in this parasha who also transcends the generations and seems somehow to be able to step beyond time. I know if Rabbi Charno was here, she would immediately be saying, I know who you're talking about. Does anyone else know who I'm talking about? Also mentioned in the clans and the genealogies that we... Yes! Serach, the daughter of Asher. Right, Serach bat Asher. Mysterious character. She's in fact the only woman in the whole Torah who is named without any further explanation as to why. But not only that, she's named not once, not twice, but 3 times. But not only that, she's named not once, but not twice, but 3 times in 3 completely different generations across the span of hundreds of years.
I don't think we use names a lot.
No, but it says specifically that it's the same person. It's Serach bat Asher. She's the daughter of Asher, right? And Asher is one of the sons of Jacob. So she's named the first time amongst all the family that goes down into Egypt. But she's the only woman of her generation who's named. So mysterious as to why. And then she's named in the going out of Egypt. And now she's named again here as they're about to enter the land. Hundreds of years have passed. So this, of course, gives rise to the question, 2 questions. Was this really the same person who's still alive after these hundreds of years? And also, who is she? Why? Who is she? What's going on with this mysterious character of Sarah? So you may be familiar with the wonderful midrash that when the sons of Jacob return from Egypt, having discovered that their brother Joseph is in fact not only alive, but in fact now the viceroy of all of Egypt, they need to break the news to their father. But they're very afraid if they just go up and they say to him, Dad, guess what? You'll never guess who we saw. That their poor old father, who's been in grief all these years, totally heartbroken, is gonna, God forbid, have a heart attack. And, that's what they're afraid, that the shock is going to be too much for him. That it will do him, do him a terrible harm. So, according to the Midrash, and there's a wonderful Renaissance retelling of this Midrash, as they're coming back, who comes out to greet them but Sarah, their niece or their family member? And the Renaissance version says she was very skilled at the lyre, at the lute. She was a skilled musician and singer. And they say to her, "Can you go tell Dad, what's happened, but do it in a sensitive way?" And so she comes to him while he's praying, and she sits down nearby where he can hear her, and she starts to play a song, and she explains what's happened in the form of a poem, of the song, which she plays to music. And because it comes to him in this beautiful form while he's in this, she picks the right moment and she does it in the right form, he's able to receive the news. And at first he thinks, am I dreaming? Did I just hear that Joseph is alive? And then when the brothers, his sons, come and tell him, he's like, okay, that's what I thought I heard. But she's already sort of prepared the ground for this realization. So that's the first story. That's the first legend that we have about Sarah, right back in the day. Then the Midrash tells us, a few different Midrashim tell us, that while she was in Egypt, she was the one that the generation of the tribes of her father and his brothers transmitted to her mystical secrets, such that she was the one who would know when the Redeemer came along how to tell that he was really for real. So the Midrash says when Moshe comes from his encounter with the burning bush and comes and says, God has sent me to say, I'm your God, I'm going to take you out and going to bring you to the land I promised to your forefathers. They're like, okay, we're not quite sure who this guy is and if he's for real. We think he's some kind of prince that was raised in the palace of the Pharaoh. They go to Sarah. And Sarah asks them various questions and confirms, yeah, this is the guy. He's legit. And then when they're leaving Egypt, you may remember that Joseph has made them swear that though he's been embalmed and buried in Egypt, that they won't leave without taking his coffin, taking his body, his remains with them. Serach is the one who knows where to look for where Joseph is buried. So she's the one who carries the memory across the generations of what has come before and what will happen in the future. Now the rabbis, of course, also say, so why is she named and nobody else? Ramban, Nachmanides, actually gives a wonderful answer. He says, she had her own clan. That's why she's named as a clan leader. None of the other women did, she did. And we don't hear more about it, basically because we live in a patriarchal society and they were embarrassed that their ancestor, their clan leader was a woman. So that's why more isn't said about it. He literally does say that. So his answer is literally, she was a clan head and her sisters and cousins were not. But there's something, that's not the only way that the story is read. In the Talmud, they actually do think that she didn't die. And there's stories later in the Book of Kings where the leaders need to consult with a very old woman, and the woman isn't named in Tanakh, but the Talmud says, yeah, that's Sarah. She's still alive in the time of the kings. And this is in Tractate Sota. And we have this idea is also rooted in the Midrash, because as we remember the story of Jacob, when he hears this news from her that his beloved Joseph is still alive, he blesses her. He says, this mouth which has brought forth such beautiful news to me and has given me a new lease of life, may this mouth never know death, but never taste death. So according to the Midrash, it's Jacob who blesses Sarah with this immortality. One other thing I think is worth mentioning is Sarah, the name obviously is quite similar to Sarah, right? It's almost the same letters. The hey and the chet almost even look the same, right? Just a slight difference. Sarah obviously is the original matriarch, the founder of the whole people. And the name, the bit they have in common, the sin resh, is a very powerful particle. It can, in our tradition, can mean angel, but its meaning is basic meaning is chieftain, like prince, ruler. And we actually see this name in many other languages. The word Shah, Tsar, Kaiser, Caesar are all the same Indo-European sin resh root. So Sarah may have some resonance with Sarah, the enduring power of the original foremother. It also, the word itself, Sarah, means overlapping, which is very interesting when we think about the way that she creates this overlap between the generations. So Sarah has in common with her couple other characters who were mentioned in the genealogy we read in the clan names. I don't know if anyone was paying close attention, but there's another little inkling of immortality that we read this morning. Did anybody else notice the little inkling of immortality? I like that you're nodding and shaking your head. You're like, yes, no, I didn't notice. So we heard also about the sons of Korach, right? Korach and his followers were swallowed up by the earth, a couple parshiot again, and sort of recapped this morning. But the sons of Korach, it says, we read this morning, they didn't die. It says the sons of Korach did not die. That could mean, on a literal level, they didn't die they weren't swallowed up by the earth along with their father. But the rabbis say, no, actually, they had also this strain of immortality. Who were the sons of Korach? Like Sarach bat Asher, they were the musicians. So a number of the psalms are attributed to the sons of Korach. So I think we have in here another, symbolic way of understanding that which transcends time, that which transcends ordinary mortality. We have the calendar, but we also have the poem of the Torah itself, that the music, the poetry that we continue to sing from generation to generation. And you, Gali and Chris, must be so proud to see your children. We saw not just Moshe leading the Torah service and learning from Torah, but also Amitai ready to rest the Torah. You know, this love song that we pass from parents to children, from grandparents to grandchildren. I see that your favorite people call you Savta. I'm sure your example too is an inspiration to them as lovers of Torah. This love song of the Torah is another way that we transcend mortality, that we keep singing this song, telling this story, chanting this ancient poetry from generation to generation. And even as we know that we come upon this earth and we live, as the psalm says, if we're very strong, we might live to be 80 years old. And we might live more than that, we might live less than that. We're probably not going to live to be older than 120, at the very, very oldest. We come and we go. But that which sustains us, the song of Torah, endures and gives us life beyond the mortal life of our generations. So with the inspiration of Serach, I bless us to continue to receive that poetry and to pass it on. And who better to lead us in Musaf than Gali, this mother of wonderful children.